Okay, so I tried to go uh, right before after Sarah because I thought the timing was right, but I wasn't on the right screen. But that's okay. So, um, intersectionality within the academy um, is something that I'd heard a lot, but I had no real understanding of until we got to the materials and to week three in the conversation. And it was very, very informative to me. And um, I had planned to go a certain way with this presentation. And then yesterday I had an experience that made me think of why we gather together, and kind of in the vein of how Sarah was seeking to give us something. I hope to create that similar uh, energy, thinking about it as just how things interact, and the things that I'm talking about interacting are the intersectionality. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. It just popped up. The intersectionality of being students here at Starr King. One of the things that I do in my journey and in my life is I'm a mental health advocate and a mental health counselor. And so in the academy definition of intersectionality, mental health is a part of um, the intersection. And the reason and our purpose for being here as students at Starr King, and the interplay of mental health and spirituality and our role as spiritual leaders, and by default, our role as spiritual leaders as mental health peer counselors. I thought yesterday I got a call from a colleague of mine, and I raised this with you, and it shifted the character of my conversation with you today, because I highlight this for illustration purposes. This gentleman is a Rhodes Scholar, and he is an extremely successful tech entrepreneur. But he and I are involved with a third colleague who's going through some very challenging mental health issues at this particular time. And in our conversation yesterday afternoon, he said to me, I speak to him regularly, but I don't speak to him about the incident that happened or what's going on with his recovery because I don't know how to address it. And I thought about that, and I told him something that's going to come up later in the presentation. But I told him you just need to address the thing directly, because you have to give something a name and respect it in that way for it to be addressed. So you have to address it, and to do it with kindness and compassion. So with that setup, I shared that when I started law school, my first semester in law school, this is my first semester in divinity school. There's no real anything except for that coincidence. But I had a professor, his name was Mark Fager, and he taught a class called Elements, which was only taught at 2 schools in the country, so it was unique for that purpose. But he was very unique in my entire academic journey, and he's the only professor that wrote me a letter as a student in his class that he distributed to everyone in the class. Wrote me a letter telling me all about him, as like a personal letter, as if we were on one of the dating apps or something, because it was a very intimate disclosure of who he was. But what he shared in that letter is that he had a diagnosis of narcolepsy. and that he didn't get that diagnosis until 12 years out of law school. And the journey he had gone is through his first job where he basically got fired because he was a narcoleptic and didn't know he was a narcoleptic. And it challenged him in his beginning as a professor. And so I share that because in my own journey, I had an experience where I was very well aware that I had a mental health problem. And it's very common for everyone knows that if you have teeth, that you have to take regular care of your teeth and you have to see the dentist. Well, here's another thing is it's not the same for people in their brains, right? Everyone knows they have a brain. And the question is your brain routine on par with your dental hygiene routine, right? And so there's a statistic that says the average American goes 11 years between knowing they have a mental health issue and taking direct action, acknowledging and addressing the issue. 11 years is a decade. And so in my own personal journey, I became that particular statistic in that in 2001, I was made aware that I had some neurological differences in the average bear. And it wasn't until 2012 when two sheriffs the size of The Rock and The Rock's big brother, the bigger Rock, showed up with some papers that had my mother's signature on them that said I had to come with them and go to the hospital until they were going to let me out. And that's when my 11-year period came to an end and I started to fully engage and be a part of my mental hygiene. And so let me get back to my presentation. I shared that with you guys because the intersection of spirituality and mental health. So this is from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and they talk about many different aspects of they talk about many different aspects of the description of what spirituality is. But this is the part that I thought was important. What is spiritual healthcare? And this goes back to the conversation that I had with my colleague yesterday. You want to make the person feel safe and secure, to be treated with dignity and respect, to feel that they belong and are valued and trusted. You want to take time, allow time for them to express their feelings to mental health carers. And that's where I thought the timing was perfect, because as Professor Frediani said, sometimes you have to kind of do a little hand-holding and get them to that mental health provider. And one of the things that I wanted to answer for Julie is, like, my foundation, one of the things that we do in the concept of mutual, the term that I can't recall from the, I see you trying to help me, Professor, but I can't.
Mutual aid, I said.
Mutual aid. So we have peer specialists who, a peer specialist is someone who takes their lived experience with a condition and they've taken that and they use it as a tool to help others with a similar condition who are not as far along in the recovery journey as the peer specialist. And so we pair the peer specialist with people with similar challenges so they can tell them what it is that they've done, what they've experienced, because peer review and study shows that mental health works a lot like addiction, and they found that an alcoholic is much more likely to listen to an alcoholic, which is why Alcoholics Anonymous has such good statistical success, because it's more likely that if somebody read a book about a subject and starts talking about it, as opposed to somebody has lived their life on a subject and starts talking about it, people are always going to gravitate to the person that's lived their life with it. So with that, let's get back on track because that was not part of my, and so, you know, it's like, who are the Royal College of Psychiatrists? And they're the body for the United Kingdom. So at this point in time, essentially, like, they're the king's advisors to try to keep psychology and spirituality within the realm in order, which is in part our role. So mental health benefits of religion and spirituality, and this is brought to you guys through the National Alliance on Mental Health, which is one of the largest and most active and productive organizations in the country, if you're not familiar with them. And this is a 2016 article that I just clipped for you guys. And it reads like, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, just to identify my perspective. So it kind of reads like an advertisement for our community, our fellowship. The benefits of the merging of mental health and religion from NAMI's perspective are about the community, the ritual of the religion, the teachings, because almost every religion without exception has positive teachings in it. Mental health benefits of spirituality. Spirituality is a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves. It helps a person look within and understand themselves while also figuring out the greater answer of how they fit into the rest of the world. In other words, it helps people understand their interpretation of the meaning of life. And we're at a divinity school, and that's a big question, but somehow there's a thread of that and what brings us all together. And so when, I can't remember everybody's names right now, I should have written it down, but earlier when the presentation was given and the distinction was made of how communities were a problem, for definitions, people having different definition of what community went, and so they used a new term. They used pods, and that's a direct example of the neuroplasticity around words. And neuroplasticity around words is a fundamental element of the life coaching paradigm that I utilize in my journey in my life with my organization. So for example, we encourage people that are having a problem taking their pills to give it a new name, call it Skittles, call it Dig Dugs, call it anything other than pills, and then give it a due definition, just like pods. And the definition is something like, this helps me stay balanced, this helps keep me on my path, whatever it is that is the affirmation that helps them connect more strongly with their need to take the medication on a regular basis to stay stable in their journey. So, and the concept of the academy and intersectionality, one of those bullets is the mental health perspective. And then there's all of the other things that come into the academy's definition of intersectionality, and they're all very important. And then likewise, in the street's definition of intersectionality, there's our roles as spiritual leaders, the fact that we all have brains. So I encourage you to think about that. And the takeaway is, you have a brain. Everyone you're ever going to encounter as a client, friend, confidant, stranger on the street has a brain. And give space and grace to that construct and concept. And with that, I will open it up to any questions, comments, or disparaging words.
I want to say I really appreciate how you tied in and made relevant this information to our future or current roles as spiritual leaders, right? It's really helpful to say, like, here's this topic and here's how it relates to, like, us as UU professionals or religious professionals. And I just want to say your presentation was super slick. Love the moving parts. Sorry.
So I had a mentor that told me a couple of years ago, literal words, get your act together. And so I've been focusing in that. Thank you. That's my effort, to get my act together to run with the big dogs. So I'm open to any other questions, comments. But if there are none, please remember the walk away from this is that everybody has a mental health portfolio, and it's as important as your cardiovascular portfolio, your dental portfolio, your right knee, your left knee, your middle finger. They're all connected.
I think we can give it a couple minutes. I think more will come up. Comments doesn't necessarily have to be questions. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, Don, you even pointed to this in your presentation, like someone who has lived experiences. I mean, and Zaire too touched on this. People who have like the credential of like, I have a PhD in this versus someone who has like the equivalent of a PhD in their life experience. And I really appreciate your experiences that you shared throughout this class of, you know, your experience with your own mental health and now how you're able to like interact with your clients in that way in such a more informed way. So I feel like this was really valuable of a topic to hear from you. So thank you.
And I thank you, Sarah, because one of the things that you have on your resource sheet that me and Sarah through the galactic interwebs collaborated to put together is my contact information. And at any point, if you ever have a question that taps the hot wire of mental health, please reach out to me because it's literally what I do. And one day in the very near future, I'll be able to say I wrote the book on it. So.
Fantastic. And there's, Don, there's some comments from Julie, or actually questions, I should say, in the, well, both in the chat.
I'll share my presentation in the discussion or a link to it. And I'll also put a link and information on how you can engage with the foundation. I should have had that ready and stuff, but I had to do my painting. Thank you, guys.
No, thank you. Certainly a lot of resonance with the presentations today, yes?